Hi guys, today we're going to be using SHAPER, which is a surfboard building program, but we're going to be using it to make a skateboard plan. So I'm going to start by going File, New. I'm going to choose a shortboard. We're going to be having a look at the outline. At the moment you can see it's way too long, and in fact it's obviously 6'2", and we've got our dimensions here, which we can modify later on. But we can't do that until we remove some slices. So at the moment what we're going to be doing is we're going to go to the slices, we're going to select the nose slice, and we're going to go slices, delete current slice. We're going to select this one, delete that slice, and we'll just leave it as those two. That should be fine, of course, if you're making a longboard type skateboard, but if you're making a shorter board, we will need to further remove the middle slice. Otherwise what we'll do is the computer won't be able to calculate the shape. So interesting to know, we've got feet, centimeters and millimeters. If you wanted to change all these, probably easier to work with centimeters on something of this scale. So now that we've removed slices, we're going to actually change some dimensions just as a rough guide at this stage. Those will change as we go, so we'll keep it under a meter, let's just say 95, and a bit of a fun board shape, so we'll keep it nice and wide, so 25 or so, and thickness we can't change till later. Just to give you an idea of sizes, it might be good to introduce the bay, and if we scroll out you can kind of see we've shortened that surfboard considerably, and it's a ridiculous looking surfboard, and of course we're making a skateboard, so you'll see how that changes as we go through the rest of the dimensions. So we've moved to outline from the bay, and we're going to play around with these handles and come up with a bit of a fun board type shape, maybe a little bit of point. Obviously you can fully round that, might leave a little bit of a point there. At the moment there's a big flat spot through here, so we want to kind of tweak and trim that with this yellow handle, get something a little bit smoother. Obviously you can kind of see if you bring in that red handle, it plays around with the kind of the severity of the curve. I'm just going to leave it how it was. You'll notice the width's changed, it's slightly bigger now, so you might want to at some stage reduce that width, and I want to keep that around about the 24 and tweak as we go. So we're going to play around with the tail now. First thing to do is I'm going to grab that blue handle there and get a little bit more width in that tail, and once again everything you do will have a bit of reaction, so you might want to kind of play around with the outline. Normally I do that sort of smoothing towards the end. We'll have a go at doing a fishtail. Now with the fishtail, the common mistake is to do something like this, which just looks a bit ugly. So what you're going to need to do is move that in a bit, and then we're going to actually want to obviously not do that. We're going to want to, if you play with that yellow handle there, you kind of get this nice reverse curve there. Slide the red bit in and you'll get a nice fishtail. Obviously there's a million type of batwing tails you could do, squares, rounded diamonds, whatever you want to do. So we're going to go back to the bay, and on the bay you won't actually be able to see that fishtail, but you can see we've got that rounder shape. Now we're going to need to tweak the top and the bottom now, because that's not the type of rocker we want on our skateboard. We're going to make it quite flat. So what we'll do is we'll now go to the bottom. We're going to need to pull the blue handle down to there. It's going to rise up, so we'll just try and flatten it, and you'll see the board wants to shrink down. What I might do is put a little bit of reverse in it. I'll now go to the top. You might want to zoom out a bit so you can make sure you reach all these handles. So I've reduced these down, still way too big in the middle, so I can thin it down, and I'm not going to show you too much about putting kicks in. Suffice to say that you can actually add a point, and if we're in the top I can actually add a point, and that gives me a whole bunch of other stuff to tweak. So you can play around with that in your own time. A little bit of reverse camber on it, which will act nice and springy. I'll go back to the bay, and you should be able to see I've got something that's a lot more flatter and a lot more like a skateboard. So we're kind of done here. Obviously you can play around with different types of looks and that, but what we want to do is take a few screenshots, which you can do by printing screen, and then the most important thing we want to do is actually go File, Print, make a PDF to send to friends and customers. You can put your logo in it if you wanted to. We're going to name the file first, and we'll call that Testboard 2. Save that. So I found that file. Sometimes I get lost, and it's called Testboard 2. Now if I open that, what we should have is a nice PDF that we could design a surfboard, or in this case a skateboard off, and tells us heaps of information, but most importantly it's a cool looking page that we can put in our design work, and when we're building a tech deck we can scale and shrink this down so it fits. Cool, hope you enjoyed this video, and now you know how to make a surfboard in a skateboard style.